Hello and welcome to our talk this morning for Mothering Sunday. We're going to hear the story of Hannah. And Hannah was a lady who had dreamed of being a mother for so long. This is her story. I've been dreading this day for years. I hoped it wasn't going to arrive, and yet I knew it would. Time ticking by slowly, yet speeding by too quickly, since that day about 4 years ago when I'd realised I was pregnant. I was so excited then, so happy that God had remembered me, his lowly servant. Happy that finally I would be able to have a child. And yet, at the same time, that little twinge of doubt, gnawing at my heart that if he were a boy, he wouldn't be my child. He would be God's child. I didn't know then how hard it was going to be to do this, handing over my child to God forever. And yet I can still remember the kindness in the priest's eyes as I had met him the year before in the place of sacrifice and worship. And that gives me hope somehow, that despite my pain and sorrow, something good will come of this. He didn't start off kindly, Eli the priest, that is. In fact, he was rather harsh. He thought I was making a spectacle of myself. But how can you be making a spectacle of yourself if you're praying, pouring out your heart to God? He thought I was drunk, that's how. How could he mistake my heartfelt prayer for drunkenness? I know I wasn't making any sound, but I hadn't wanted to wake him as he slumbered in his chair, dressed in his priestly robes. He'd looked a bit like how I'd imagined God to look, peaceful, kindly, generous, loving maybe even. And I hadn't wanted to disturb that image. I was hoping beyond hope that this would be the time, the year, when God would hear my desperate plea for a child. Each year it was growing harder. My husband, Elkanah, in his frustration at me not being able to have a child, had married another wife called Peninnah. Each year Peninnah's taunts about me not being able to have children grew harder to bear. It was all right for her. She already had children. It didn't make me feel any better that Elkanah loved me and he didn't really love her. He just needed an heir. I guess it just didn't make her feel any better either, knowing that she was second best. Elkanah made it obvious. He always gave me the best food and clothes, and I knew that Peninnah was jealous, and that's why she taunted me for being barren, spurned by God. But knowing about her jealousy with my head didn't make my heart feel any better. Elkanah didn't understand either. He couldn't seem to understand why I might want my own children now that he had an heir with Peninnah. He thought that he should be worth more than 10 sons to me. But why couldn't he see that although I loved him dearly, it just wasn't the same? What was I doing wrong that God had closed my womb? It isn't the same to hold and comfort someone else's child. I wanted to love my own child, to carry them within me for 9 months like any other woman could. To know that closeness, that bond that other mothers have with their children. To lift them when they fell and tell them it would be all right, to hold them tight. And what about if Elkanah were to die? Who would look after me then if I didn't have a son? So I turned again, as I'd done so many times before, to God, to beg him to hear me, to show me his favour, as he had done to Peninnah despite her treatment of me. I was desperate. I couldn't eat with grief and disappointment. I went to the house of God in tears, and I poured out my troubles and my anxiety to God. I told him that if he would just give me a son, that I would dedicate him back to him as a Nazarite until the day he died, that he wouldn't drink alcohol or cut his hair, and I meant it, every word. What an honour it would be to be able to give a child back in service to God, in praise for the gift of that child, for the return of my honour, for the end of Peninnah's taunts and Elkanah's sympathetic but non-understanding glances. And that's when the priest Eli woke and suggested I was drunk. I was horrified that a priest could think this of me. But when he listened to my plea, he seemed to understand my distress in a way that no one had before, in a way that I hoped, but hardly dared believe, that God might just understand. And he sent me on my way in peace. And I felt it, peace, for the first time in a long time. The peace of being understood, the shalom of God. Nothing had changed, yet everything had changed. For the first time in weeks, I felt able to eat. I felt able to continue. For the first couple of months, I hoped that I would become pregnant. I trusted and I hoped. But nothing happened. And soon my life returned to how it had been before. Peninnah taunting me daily, trying to win Elkanah's love and favour. The days in that holy place seemed to become a more distant memory. But I remembered my prayer and the kindness in Eli's eyes as he blessed me and asked God to grant my petition, and I clung to that through the long nights. And then, finally, it happened. God opened my womb. For the first few months I hardly dared believe it. But as the child grew stronger within me and I felt his kicks, I trusted and praised the Lord. And whilst a small part of me hoped for a daughter to keep by my side forever, I knew that God would bless me with a son. I didn't see giving him to the temple as keeping a bargain. I saw it as a small way to thank God for his generosity and favour. A child to be used however he saw fit, whatever the cost to me. But I didn't tell Elkanah about my vow. I wasn't sure how he would react. I wanted to be sure I was having a son first. When he was born, I knew what he must be called. Samuel. It means God has heard. I didn't go with Elkanah to offer the sacrifices after his birth. I didn't want to return to Shiloh until Samuel was weaned. I couldn't bear the thought of losing him. Going to God's house would be too great a reminder of what I was going to do. Elkanah supported me. I thought he might refuse, that he might laugh at me, after all the tears that I had shed to gain a son in the first place. But now Samuel is weaned. I have to leave him with Eli, leave him with the Lord. When we came to God's house, Eli remembered me and my tears. I know he will take good care of Samuel, and I will see him when we return each year to make our annual sacrifices. My heart feels like it's breaking, and yet I feel such a hope, such a joy, such a deep peace. I know that the Lord will use Samuel in his service, that he will do great things. Call it mother's instinct if you will, but I can feel it deep in my heart that wants to burst into song and tell everyone of the Lord's favour, to exalt his name to the nations.